and become the role. And we're seeing him come through his youth, actually, and we're seeing his parentage and the mistakes which were made prior to this sort of kingship concept, almost the development of that concept. Now, like me, we often stop and think, well, how much is Halliday and David Marlowe bringing to this lineage that Shakespeare, in the sequence of the way the plays were written, may not have been able to consciously and deliberately present this. And it's a knotty problem. It is a knotty problem. And you have to say that, having seen the plays both through Halliday's eyes and without that sort of help, it certainly enriches every possible nuance that there is inside it. And this whole concept that Shakespeare was formulating what a king should be, in its probably most convincing and sophisticated form in civilization. We've a whole history of kingship, and we've a whole presentation of what leadership could possibly be. But the subtlenesses that Halliday brings out of the Shakespeare are quite phenomenal. And I think essentially he does that because he sees the theme. He sees the theme in a very real, established way, and he sees it as the Christ figure incarnate in a political situation. What does the best human being do in a situation? What does the flawed human being do when presented in this situation, floundering to actually grasp the best way to behave? And that's really, I mean, in a nutshell, what we should be taking away from all of these plays and from the work that we do here. We're talking about, and it is meant to be a discussion really, this is why I'd like you to be as involved in all the reading and any questioning that, as you can. What is it that a human being can do in a situation, or probably the way we experience it is confronted with events, because our lives are stuffed full of events. There's things which are embroiling us all the time, and we have to sort of hack our way or tiptoe our way past all the clashing rocks and the pitfalls of everyday existence, and choose a thread, choose an actual pathway through. We are kings of our own life stories, and our lives are works of art which we are piecing together. We are composing ourselves. We're not done yet, you know. So we've still got themes which can be worked out and which can be concluded. And it's an amazing thing that in our own lives, realizations like the ones which are being presented to us here can change not just where we are now, but the whole meaning of the past that we've come through. You know, so you find yourself in a complete impasse. You find yourself unable to see a way through, and things look completely impossible. And then something happens, and I would suggest what Halliday is pointing out to, and embedded in the Shakespeare, what happens is we grasp something inside of ourselves first of all, and that enables us to act in a coherent way. Probably the example in the greatest time in Hamlet. It's unsaid, but you see him actually get hold of something inside of himself so that he is able, within the situation, to gel the whole thing together, even though he's knotted in the biggest sort of inconceivable knot of having murdered somebody, to be in the process of being murdered, assassinated we might say, to have lost just about everything he could possibly lose, and yet grasp the situation, or not, it's still a tragedy, but to come out of it completely self-realized, and that is a possibility for us. And when it works, we do find ourselves locked in a situation, unable to see a way out, having realized that we probably made all the wrong decisions. And yet, if we can find this thing inside of ourselves, we can unlock this whole situation, and it immediately opens like a flower. And the things which were against us are now for us, and have become not only character building, but actually enlightening. And the whole thing lifts and turns. It reminds me, when I was a boy, we used to go to the cinema and watch Zorro every week. And Zorro used to get in some horrendous situations. You'd see him in a burning building, and you realise that the floor had collapsed, and then the walls fell in on him. And then when you went next week, you realised he'd left out of the window. They never showed it the week before, so I obviously they filmed it twice, and you see him in the building, you see it collapsing, and then it reruns that last sort of 3 or 4 minutes, and you realise he got out through the window in time, or somebody brought his horse and galloped off, and the whole thing lifts so immediately, and then you realise, he's still going to win, and it's a little bit like that. You actually feel in that way, as if this situation is impossible, or that situation is irredeemable, and then suddenly it is redeemed. And it's peculiar, because I think the other thing which is what Shakespeare does present, and which we're working towards here in the Halliday interpretation of this, or sort of illumination of this, is that it's a strange mixture of the events or the environment and the individual. It doesn't just feel as if you do it by yourself. It feels as if something is helping you, that the world is helping you, the universe is helping you, and leading you. But at the same time, there are steps you have to take as well. So it's a beautiful meld of you and your situation, and you are part of the situation, but you're not running the show. You're being run and helping to run the show. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
Right. That's what I'm. I mean, I think I felt it emerging last time we were talking. So we can see, perhaps, as this develops a little bit more as we go on from the reading. So I'm going to start about page 27, which I think...
We were up to 29.
We were up to 29. Yeah.
Just a little way down. One while ago.
Yeah.
Recap.
All recaps are welcome.
Right. Well, yes. It's less of a recap, but more of a run at. If we go, we can sort of rapidly run
Yes.
through. Or I aim to do that, but of course we then get knotted down in things which we find that we hadn't quite covered well the time before. But that is, yes, you're right, because it talks of the universal order, which was very significant towards the end of the last one. So yes, okay. Let's remind ourselves. Is there anybody here who would like to help read when we come to the words of the bard? So if I look up and there's a little finger raised and I point at you, would you please take that thing? Remember, we are talking throughout here of invoicing these words, of actually vocalizing these things, of putting your energy into this instrument and making it work, making it play music. So when you do that, you're actually vibrating this whole edifice of the body and making it sort of hum with the sounds that were, as far as we're concerned here, structured particularly to make us resound, to make us understand the being that's speaking. And the more interpretation you can get into it in that way, the more effect you'll have upon yourself. And these things were meant to be played. I remember Eugene saying that if you really play a part and you're completely consistent and you never act out of character, then what's the difference between you and that character? Isn't there? You've become that role. So in actually becoming a role, even for just a short time on the stage, you are embodying that and you're changing the substance quite significantly. I think we spoke last time about the mask and the whole concept of how a mask affects an actor. They often get haunted by them, you know, these things take over. Right, so.
What you were just saying, that implies that the observer is observing the observer.
Yes.
Actually.
Yeah.
Wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
But yeah, doesn't the hired observer need to have a small space between the big O and the little O, as it were?
What I think you've done, Ron, is you put your finger on the nub of a very, very significant problem, which we all have. I first came across it, it's beautifully put in a book called Malone Dies by Samuel Beckett. And in this, when I first read it, I thought he's getting at a point that we've all seen, that you can have an infinite regression, because as observers, we can observe ourselves, and then we can observe ourselves observing ourselves, and observing ourselves observing ourselves. Now, in drama, that's called metadrama. Because remember, you've got an audience watching a play, and what they love to do, and this goes right back to Aristotle, he thought it was the most significant point in theatre, was when you're watching a play which is about a play. You're watching a little performance inside a play, on the stage, and then you get bump, 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 you know, and you get this almost Russian doll effect of a scene being acted out inside the scene, inside another scene. And he particularly did, I mean, again, Hamlet is the ultimate one, where he writes for the actors, tells the actors what to perform, and they're performing something, an enactment, which is the murder of his father, actually. So we've got them watching a play, while we're watching a play. And he's actually commenting about this concept of observation, and it's there in Midsummer Night's Dream as well. There's lots of situations where, again, as men play women, and often Shakespeare will emphasise this fact. And we know it's a boy playing a woman on the Elizabethan stage, and so he will turn it back again, and that woman will pretend to be a man. And so we've got this metadrama going on in front of us. Now, what it gives us is this sense of observation and the sense of play acting or role play, which is a very, very human part of our existence. And it gives us this sense which, in Malone Dies, he says, well, you can keep doing this. It's an infinite regression. And of course, what happens is, and this is the knot that we as human beings have, and which I think Halliday puts into reflexive self-consciousness. We are pure observation. We have to recognize that there's nothing else which is of ourselves other than the pure observation. Everything else we see ourselves in is a reflection. And that reflection can infinitely regress, because if we try and imagine ourselves as a form, as a shape, in reality, that is an immediate thought form and cannot be us. Does that make sense? The Buddhists say that the forms are empty, and the emptiness generates form. And so every time you look into a situation, it will form itself, and you'll see it, and you'll see yourself in it, but that's not you. That's you grasping at trying to formulate who you are, and you will never get it. that is the point of getting it. You will never be able to see yourself. You are an intelligence. Eugene once said to me, you're not an intelligent person, you are intelligence. There's no person there, there's nothing sounding through, you are pure intelligence. In every situation you go, if you stop formulating it, the intelligence speaks. But what you've got to realise is, you're listening and doing it at the same time, because you don't know what it is you're going to say until you say it. Which to me was what all the yantra at work was about. You went upon the yantra and suddenly you started to do the thing. And if you, if you stop to think you're snookered, because you then start to think, I'm an Aries here, I should be doing this, you know, I'll be a bit more, and you lose it completely. You've got to just step on and go. The number of times I've sat on the edge of the yantra thinking, this is boring and tedious, I'm not interested in any of those things, and then suddenly it's your turn, you know, something pulls you on, and as soon as you step onto the damn thing, it's like a storm. You're being blown and blasted all over the place. You're made to act, and the thing suddenly sparks. So, like that, it's a drama in that sense, which can constantly, you know, it's almost like the telescoping. You see something, and then immediately you're in the scene. Well, and if you put yourself into the scene, you formed yourself, and then you're observing that. Then you think, oh, I must remember I'm the observer, and you immediately get a concept of what the observer is. Mine always used to be like a camera. I'm actually behind the camera watching the scene of me talking to this person, and then but I've already formulated it so that actually there's somebody else filming this scene of me, filming the scene of talking to this person. Now that infinite regression is where immediately you've been caught on this concept of forming yourself. You're trying to think who you are, you're trying to conceive of who you are, and you cannot do that. Shakespeare says it purely and simply, and it's repeated here many times. The eye cannot see itself, but by reflection. You're always seeing a reflection. And as beings, we identify with the reflection. We get our teeth in, we bite into this reflection and think it's us. And we can easily do that with this idea of the observer. Be careful of that. You can make an idea of being an observer. That's the thing you've got to be aware of. So how they emphasizes in the reflexive driving, you go into the situation, then you pull back. This is the self watching this situation. You don't conceive of what it is that's watching. But pure watchingness is the observer. It's empty. It has no shape. You are empty. You have no shape. As soon as you shape yourself or form yourself, you're in the play. You're caught inside that whole maya of illusion, and you're involved. And there'll be a way you should be acting and a way you shouldn't be acting, and all that thing embroils you into it. You've lost the observer. You've conceived of it and formed it, and it's gone. So it isn't a camera, and it isn't a big eyeball. That's why the Buddhists say you cannot conceive of it. You can't put it into a shape. It's inconceivable. You are it, and you've got no shape and no form. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now it is. I think it is probably the most knotty problem of all, and we all keep doing it every day, constantly, and we get more and more glimmers of realizing that we can never understand who or what we are, and the stuff that comes through us is wonderful. And I think, as William Blake says, if you can kiss that joy as it passes, if you can just ride along the sheer energy of beingness, then that is as close to enlightenment as you can describe. And it feels wonderful when you do it, but it'll never be a safe place to be, because it's constantly flowing through you. It's now. Great question, Ron. I mean, should have finished with that one. Right. Okay. So, let's start with this. It is the metanoia indicated in that speech which enables Richard the poignant soliloquy in his prison cell, the recognition of the true hierarchy of brain and soul, and the place of harmony in the measured universe. Okay, that's a long one. Anyone fancy tackling this one? in jail, you're slowly realising that you haven't quite grasped what you were there for. Please, Zoha.
Nor I, nor any man that but man is, with nothing shall be pleased till he be eased, with being nothing. Music do I hear? Ah, keep time. How sour sweet music is, when time is broke and no proportion kept. So is it in the music of men's lives. And here have I the daintiness of ear to check time broke in a disordered string. But for the concord of my state and time, had not an ear to hear my true time broke. I wasted time, and now doth time waste me.
Right. Beautiful sort of musical allusion to the fact of not actually catching, not being in with the rhythm, not being in the moment enough to actually be the king that he was named as and crowned as and just never actually achieved. It's a very subtle play in that sense, because it, you know, you can feel him going wrong in every essence of it, and you can feel the rightness often of Hotspur without actually liking the disposition of the king. You see it has to happen, and but Richard is far more lovable as he sort of descends into this state of understanding. It's too late, of course, by that time. The use of music as a symbol of the harmonic order of the universe occurs throughout the works of Shakespeare. Pythagoras and many other writers as the basis of the whole of creation. I would say in that sense it's also a wonderful image and reflection of how creation is measured and perfected and tuned, in other words. In Troilus and Cressida, Ulysses likens universal hierarchy to a well-tuned string. In The Merchant of Venice, Lorenzo tells his Jessica as they gaze at the stars from Belmont's slopes. Someone else, please.
There's not the smallest orb which thou beholdest, but in his motion like an angel sings, still choiring to the young-eyed cherubims. Such harmony is in immortal souls.
And further?
That man that hath no music in himself, nor is not moved with concord of sweet sounds, is fit for treasons, stratagems, and spoils. The motions of his spirit are dull as night, and his affections dark as airbus, but let no man be trusted.
It's just a little reflection there. The nice thing there in Richard's speech, just the third line, you know, the second running into the third line, but that a man is with nothing shall be pleased until he be eased with being nothing. Exactly what we were talking about just before that. That being nothing, or being and nothing, and nothingness is a way of reflecting that, is the understanding of the form and the emptiness. And here it comes again here. And that man who is not moved with a concord of sweet sound is fit for treasons, who has no music in himself. Someone who is trying to structure it, who can't get into the tune, who cannot follow the melody because it's playing through him. Then he's out of key with everything. He's always playing catch up. He's always trying to get in front of the music or behind, or catch up with the thing, because the flow of it and the life of it has left him behind. So he is untrustworthy because he's trying to work it out. He's trying to think his way through the yantra. He's never there in the now. Okay? So it's exactly
about
the same.
separation, isn't it?
Yes.
Really.
And but a separation from, if you like, a living moment that is coming through you, which is very, very difficult to catch. It's difficult to catch because we can't release and relax and go with it. And as soon as we come to look for a concept of ourselves, we realise we've missed it. It's gone. It was there, now it's left. If a man has none of that concern for harmony and universal order which music signifies, then he betrays himself, his king and his God, since all these are willing to uphold the cause of order for which music is the type. The greatest of all these singing orbs, of which Lorenzo speaks, for man at least, is the sovereign sphere about which the subject earth revolves. As such, Sol is the great exemplar of majesty. In all periods and cultures, rulers have taken the sun as badge and monitor. The glorious planet Sol, in noble eminence enthroned and sphered amidst the other. So we're taking this as the sun as being the central imagery, the light which is radiating outwards, surrounded by its courtiers, if you like, of planets and asteroids, moons, etc. All these whole wheel of spinning beings around this central polarity, if you like. Why I'm stressing as a polarity is if you see the thing as a central point and surrounded by other forms, now we've got a strange concept here. Actually, looking at it from edge on, the solar system looks like that, and so does the galaxy. It's sort of, it's like a double saucer. If you imagine it like a saucer, like that, it's a double saucer, and this central part here, it looks like a fried egg now, but that sun in the centre is the radiating energy out and sustaining the life of all these planets, wheeling them in the same way. But Eugene often used to talk about the fact that the whole universe itself is feeding energy into that sun. For it to radiate, the being of all those planets centered on it is what is creating the fountain, if you like. So you imagine that as a fountain of energy squirting out into and radiating around. It's being fed underneath by the underground stream. The underground stream of the particular thing is literally those other planets and the whole universe which created the planets, feeding energy into that center. So remember, his image of creation was, in the beginning, energy starts to press in onto a spot. The energy inside the spot starts to resist. It's all the same energy, and what you've got is a push and a response to a push. And that response to the push creates an edge here. And edges are always alive. The edges where the transformation and the transaction happens between things. So consciousness exists at edges. We are very conscious where something meets something else. So our skin surface is our sensitivity. Our light surfaces, we know the retina is what responds to the touch of the other. We have the thing here and the other there on the outside. And that is the magic point of sensitivity. This informs that and that informs that. So they're both informing each other mutually. So you are conscious, most significantly, at edges where two surfaces meet together. That's when they interact. And throughout yourself, if you feel consciously through your body, you will be feeling something resisting something else. So if you feel your heartbeat, you're actually feeling a pressure wave resisting from the tissue around it, or from one part of the fluid meeting another part of the fluid. It's those points of meeting which resound and give you awareness. Deep inside the sameness of the body, there is no friction, there's nothing to respond to. So that if you happen to have got, I don't know, a bunion on your left foot, it will be nagging at you and claiming attention far more than the other foot or than your left shoulder or than your right ear. These surfaces which are literally being irritated by something other, something different from themselves, are where the consciousness stands out. And if you want to become more aware of yourself, you become more aware of othernesses inside of yourself, of places which touch friction points, things which clash against opposition. The whole nature of drama is to create a situation of opposition. Jack and Jill go up the hill to fetch a pail of water, not really much of a story. Jack falls down, breaks his crown, suddenly we're interested. Conflict. How on earth are they going to get the water back down home? What's Jill going to do about this? So Jack there, lying there, blood everywhere, broken his crown. Suddenly it's a story. Imagine Hamlet if the uncle doesn't kill his father. He grows up, you know, nothing to do. A bit like Prince Charles, you know. A spare person waiting for a role to come. There's no story, there's no problem. The friction creates, the drama is where you separate two forces, make them as different as possible, and then put them together, see what happens.
With vinegar and brown paper.
Absolutely. The vinegar is the sharp bit and the brown paper is the mollifying agent. Yeah. Warren Zohar, do you have one of those jolly monks here that Eugene used to carve in plaster? Fat jolly monk, and he's holding the world in his hands. He's Jupiter. You haven't got one?
No, I haven't got one of those.
Right.
No.
Well, Eugene used to carve this image of a jolly monk, and he's got a ball in his hands, and it was meant to be beingness. Jupiter is the expansive force inside there, having been created by the Saturnine grip of the field. So we've got two functions here, Saturn, and inside there, Jupiter. And in Christianity they're known as Satan and God the Father, Dio Pater. So Eugene used to say that Jupiter is the smiling one. He realises that the drama is really a comedy. And Saturn thinks it's a tragedy. But it's the same situation. It's the ball of being, and the jolly monk has actually got hold of this ball, and Eugene used to say, and every now and again he goes, because they all quieten down inside, you see. Everything gets calmed down. We know where things are. This is where we go. Yeah, things aren't perfect, but they're balanced. And then he goes. See? And he's doing that. He's got hold of it like this. He's got this grin on his face. He's just shaking them all up again, you know. And in dramatic situations, you have to do that. There has to be something coming into the situation which stirs it all up, which separates out the bits, which brings out the things which are going to clash against each other, the othernesses, the skin surfaces which are going to force together. Yeah. I was watching something a few months ago. I've forgotten the context now. It was just a simple story where there was somebody in a situation and the only drama was the fact that one of the characters was smoking and the other person really didn't like the smoke. And for a 5-minute scene it was lovely. And you could have, if you just listened to it, you'd have just picked up what was the irritation, but you wouldn't have understood what it was. And everybody in the audience just knew that this person hated the fact that the other person was smoking, and they never clocked onto it. They never realised that they were literally winding this person up and turning the situation against themselves by something they had inadvertently done, which was light up a cigarette. And I was just watching it thinking, what a wonderful tiny bit of drama. You know, something as irritating as a cigarette is played out and not mentioned, and the audience copped onto it within about a minute, and the actors of course didn't. So there's a beautiful aristocratic metadrama, because the audience knows something that the actors don't, and that's wonderful. We always feel great. It's wonderful, that bit. You know. getting Hamlet, it happens because Hamlet kills Polonius and doesn't know, he thinks he's killed Claudius, his father. Of course the audience knows he's killed Polonius. So we know before Hamlet that he's a murderer. He thinks he's acted out revenge and that he's a great hero. And until he pulls the curtain back, we are smarter than he is. So that's another lovely piece of us knowing something more than the actors does, and that makes us feel, I don't know, it's probably a creepy sort of human trait, but we love it. We love it. Yeah, because it shows that we're working things out faster than they are. You can overdo it, of course, and oversimplify it, and then we don't feel that the drama is enough of a puzzle for us to find these things out. So that is the essence of the drama. It's actually the structuring of that conflict situation. And of course in the universe as an ordered whole, the only difference between it, you can see that this is a raging great ball of energy which is pouring out energy, terribly destructive force, that, the sun. Except at this distance. I mean, at this distance in the middle of March, we haven't got enough of that radiating heat. We'd like a little bit more of it. Later on in the year we might feel that we're getting a little bit too much. But it is like that, the fact that you have to balance the drama to get it just right. It's to do with how far away you are from that energy, how much you need for your situation, and how much you're getting, and how close or far enough away from it is. It becomes painful if you're getting too much. It becomes dearth or lack of when you're not getting enough. But there is a place of getting it just right. I remember talking to Eugene once about pain, and he said that if you think of a radiator that's full on, you can be too far away from the radiator and too cold, in which case part of your body is warm and most of it is cold. And the warm part wants to attract you to the radiator. You feel attracted to it. You find that it is satisfying your needs, and you have to get just the right distance. But if you get too close, then you'll start to be uncomfortable, and parts of your body will rebel, and the other parts will say, no, stay. You know, stay, it's just right for me. And the other parts will say, no, I'm a little bit uncomfortable. And of course, the pain comes to the point when if you actually put your hand on the radiator and hold it there, it's to do with that. What is just right for you in your situation, in your requirement at this moment? And that goes for food, for any form of stimulation whatsoever. And it goes for personalities as well. He once said to me, he had a member of his family, and their relationship was beautiful as long as this person stayed in South Africa. A letter once a year was just right between the two of them. Any closer and they had problems. And I was able to say, yeah, I can get on with my dad for about an hour. And then magically it suddenly turns off. And we start to niggle. Either I with him or he with me. So there's a time and there's an amount of energy that you can take from people. There's a threshold, as Eugene used to say. You have to actually acknowledge the fact that people have thresholds. And to go across that prematurely is wrong. You wait for the threshold to come down and for them to need and to accept a little bit more of you. Because you can be oppressive by getting too close to people. It's like we call personal space now, don't they? We've all got our personal space. Some people like to be about 8 foot away from you when they talk to you. Other people like to be very close. I remember being scared stiff when I went to Morocco. I went to Morocco as a young boy of 16. And in Morocco they get very close when they speak to you. They like to whisper down your ear. And it feels really disturbing. They lean right in and they whisper down there. They speak to you very closely. And they pull back to look what the effect that they've had on you. They look right into your eyes then to see what that's done. And it's very disturbing to a delicately brought up Englishman. Luckily, the friend I had with me was the son of a market trader, and he thought this was wonderful. You know, he was mixing it with you know, and as I was sort of scared stiff, he was handling the situation very well indeed. Of course, you know, most of them are pickpockets, so certainly where we were, and so the getting close was very tricky. You pull your coat close, put your hands in your pockets quick, you know. But they did actually come very close. You could smell their bodies and their sweat and also their breath very much, because they come right into your private space, you know. You can actually watch that at parties as well. You can actually see some people, you know, backed against the wall. They've been pushed farther and further back because you can only get space to a certain point, and then you're up against the wall. Then you start going up, trying to get above these people, if you can. And they're underneath, sort of working away. They're pushing away at you, and it's, you know, you're backed away. And it's because people are not recognising or accommodating other people's threshold. It's a process of energy putting out, and how sensitive that skin surface is.
It's the same in paintings, which I'm involved in at the moment, and with music, isn't it? If you haven't enough space, the thing can't work.
Yeah.
Or you feel it can't work. It's your painting, so it can't work. Certainly.
Yeah, and it's to do with the energy that's in there, and also the amount of disorder, or what feels to be disorder, because it's energy coming at you too quickly to sort, I would say. And in that sense, we are profoundly affected by simple things like patterns and things. That, you know, someone can actually have pattern clothes on them which you can dislike quite intensely, and it has an effect on you in that situation. And so the person, it isn't just a person that's there, it's also a whole system of visual stimuli, as well as sound stimuli as well. The meter of their talking, the rhythm of their talking, and the tones that they actually come to you with in their voice. It's very strange sometimes if you come across somebody whose voice has been distorted by the common cold or so. It's quite comical, and or harsh, when you feel that voice get that strange metallic. Sometimes bronchitis gives a metallic sound to the vocal cords when they're speaking to you, and it can be quite painful just to listen to them. About a year ago, we were in the company of a full-grown donkey, and when it actually started to bray, I found it like a physical assault. The sound that it made, and it sounded like some poor thing trying to make a sound, like it had never made a sound before in its life. And it wasn't just an ear, but you could feel the breath scraping against the vocal cords. So I was discomforted, and this thing was about 50 yards away. And I'd never been, I suppose, that close to an animal. It sounded as if it was in incredible distress, but it wasn't. It was passing a comment to another donkey, probably in a field away. Time of day probably is all it was, but it went on for about 2 or 3 minutes, and it was very sort of difficult thing to listen to. It was breaking me up inside. All my parts that amplified that, because we're both mammals, and my parts are very, very similar to his ears. Well, his or hers, I didn't actually check what sex it was. But mine were breaking down with the effort that this thing was making. So all these are literally the impact of energies upon us, and the lack of harmony. Now if there's energy coming at you, everything in the universe must be harmonious. You might have a part that doesn't appear to be harmonious because you can't see where the forces that resolve it are. But there are forces that resolve it in that universe. The forces that resolve the sun are in this whole vast universe, reflecting back on each other. So if you're in Mercury here, in a very close-in orbit, we can't conceive of any form of life that could exist there, because the amount of radiation energy that's hitting it must be extreme. It's bad enough when you think about the Sahara or somewhere like that, but if you can imagine what it would be like in this planet here, that close to the sun, there's so much energy. But there is resolution of all those energies. It dwindles further and further out, doesn't it? So there's less and less radiation getting out to the furthermost planets. So for us, there would be not enough existence there for us to get, not enough light in there and heat to keep us alive. So it's this moderation of finding the place where you can actually resolve and form yourself harmoniously regarding your tissues and your structure, what actually resolves itself with the energy that's coming at you. There's something quite creepy about the creatures that can exist with very, very little sunlight. We've just been renovating a house, and of course there are two places which you feel are quite uncomfortable. When you go beneath the floor, we've been in the subfloor this week, and when you go up into the loft. Now, both of these places are usually dark and dingy, and it's just fascinating to go into that atmosphere and to feel that creepiness come on. You know, it's reduced energy, and the creatures that live up there are weird. You know, they like the dark, and they like the damp, and they like the cold. Something odd about that. Something fishy about it. Literally fishy about it. You know, the webs and the slithering white creatures that live in the soil deep down. You know, with no colour in their bodies. And right. This is just me, of course, talking about it. So here we are talking about this level of resistance, if you like, or response to, or irritability that we have on our skin surfaces. And that's the essence of that word consciousness. That she in it is the separation that you can feel, the difference between two things. Right. From the heliocentric system of planetary forces down to the small economy of man, the order is the same. An established and therefore soulless power is the point of reference around which a subject system orbits, obedient to its sovereign. All rulers are, therefore, like the sun, alone in their place, whether they be captains of a soul, a ship, or a state. The system which lies under the rule of such a solar being is necessarily passive to his authority. For such an ordered system or realm is laid down by its monarch. Thus the Dane law was that part of the land which was under the authority of the Dane. Law comes from the verb to lay. So the law which is laid down is passive to its author, which is why the king claimed to be neither subject nor passive to the law which he makes, but is over it. Only the subject is thrown down at the foot of judgment. The subject owes allegiance and obedience to him who can command the subject's need. Though Henry V is wise enough to say that he cannot command the health of it. The word obedience leads us back in its etymology to audir, meaning to listen, to hear. We are with the commanding word again, the fiat by which the creation was brought to be as a resisting substance, a resounding board by which the Creator can hear his intent and purpose echoed in his ear. In this respect, the audience in the theatre, at whatever level, becomes the substance of the actor, needful to him as a sounding board, as an affirming or denying his word. Richard II, in Disgrace, is spoken of thus in relation to Bolingbroke.
As in the theatre, the eyes of men, after a well-graced actor leaves the stage, are idly bent on him that follows next, thinking his prattle to be tedious.
Yes. Now this responsiveness, I remember David talking about on several occasions about the fact that you don't just read your lines, because you are being received, you're always hearing the audience. You're very, very aware to how people are taking you. Otherwise, the point of your speech will be lost. So you have to measure your timing to the assumption of the audience. They have to be with you. If you speak too quickly, they won't get what you just said until you're into your next line, and that will compound it and confound them, because they'll always be a little bit behind you. You have to give them the time to measure it. I mean, the time is very important in terms of comedy, because The laugh, if you're not careful, will drown out your second line. So if you say something that's witty and they laugh and you've already started the second bit, they'll lose that completely, or they'll lose the laugh. They can't hold on to things, so you have to measure yourself. And you have to give them time to get your understanding, what you want them to understand. And that is the whole soul of being a good reader, is to be able to give people time. So that, you know, it's one of those truisms that you can't be too slow or too loud. You know, we all need to slow down a lot when we speak in terms of in front of people, and we all need to speak loudly and clearly for the people. You know, you should actually speak to the back, and you should measure your tones for the slowest understanding in the room, if you can. The people who are getting it will wait. You know, they'll be a little bit impatient for you to move on, but they'll get it. And it's important that the whole room becomes a unity in understanding the substance of the text that you're giving them. So actors are very, very aware of this. The audience is a sounding board, and there are no two audiences that are the same. So live theatre has this peculiar responsiveness. You're changing people, you're actually forming them in the process of the play. You're bringing them into a situation that you want to actually change them. You want them to follow the process of what's happening to the characters. Each character should develop so that there's a place for everybody in the audience to see a development of somebody similar to them. And they'll identify perhaps even with a villain or in a particular situation, or with one of the lesser characters quite formally, as well as with the hero. Just about everybody identifies with the hero, as well as one or two other characters. If it's a good play, if the other characters are developing and are going through their own dramas, they've got some degree of tension. They're not just floating along and helping the principal character. They're actually going through a process as well. And his tension puts them in tension. So in the ultimate play of Hamlet, we see that Ophelia is being stressed by the fact that of the things that Hamlet does to the situations around him. They affect her. Polonius is affected. The Queen is affected. Everybody has gone through a process of development. They're all damaged goods that are trying to sort themselves out as well. And we watch them sort themselves out, or not, as the case may be, in the process of the play. But we just don't get that much information about them. We get enough to let us know that they're real people, but not enough to captivate us, perhaps. As in the theatre, so in the world, if they hear the word arrive, not proceeding from an authentic centre, a people and an audience will reject its rule. What is appropriate within a given system is what belongs to it, what was intended in the unique structure of its founding word. It follows, therefore, that the rule of law which governs the realm must be appropriate to it. France cannot be governed as England is. So it is with the realm of individual man. To thine own self be true is a recommendation to govern oneself in accordance with the truth of one's founding will. The failure of a governor is due entirely to an abandonment of this principle, that the estate of man or realm has a law peculiar to itself. Says William Blake, one law for the lion and the ox is oppression. This adherence to a founding principle upon which the function of the system is based is observed in the totems of tribal society. Badger people did not live by the same law as wolf people. Their law and law were different because their founding function and intent was different. In much the same way, the heraldic system, which evolved from clan totems, did so in order to tabulate and signal the peculiar function of a line, family, or institution. The will to a governing concept is then the basis of law. This governing concept is important here because we have to see ourselves as marching to different drums to those people around us. If you don't recognize that, then you will misapprehend the people around you. They are not as you are. They are similar, and we tend to, like birds of a feather, flock together with people who are similar to us. But we are constantly coming up against people who live in a completely different universe. They're focused on different things. They see things in a different way. And even with those people who are close to you and may be interested in theatre, may be interested in art, or may be interested in music, what they hear, what they see, and what they are tuned to will be different from yours. So there aren't just musical societies, there are different types of musical society. Even within something like jazz, there are all sorts of fractions and fragments of it. So we are still tribalizing ourselves by our affections. We form ourselves into groups. We make ourselves into little villages of people who are similar in certain ways. You'll be members of certain villages from the music that you like, the art that you like, probably the TV programs that you watch, or the theatre shows you go to. And it's in this way that we make ourselves into small villages, particularly in vast cities like the ones we live in. There's a great deal of work done on people, and it says virtually that you probably know about 100 people fairly well. About 20 you'll class as friends, and of those there'll be 3, 4, 5 who are close friends. And this is what people do just about everywhere. In small villages, it's sometimes the whole village who they know well. But in large cities, they still know roughly the same number of people. So that is tuned by us, by our affections and the things that we like and the things that we choose to do. Partly it works in, even so that most armies are structured into chains of command which centre around about 100 people that you can know in a way that you can identify with them. So these would be brigades. Of course, in the Roman it would be the centurion, and it literally is phalanx of men. It would be around about 100, with hangers on it would be about 120, 130. And this is a form which we as human beings find comprehensible. When a factory gets bigger than that, it starts to split up into different groups. It has to, because we still work on friendship basis or on knowingness. We like to know the people we are dealing with. So that even though you could phone people, if you really want a good business meeting, you go and see them. We are as human beings giving off so many signals that the telephone can't carry. Even Skype can't carry most of the signals nowadays. You need to be in the presence of the person to actually comprehend them and understand what they're getting at. So we still send businessmen to South America and to Arabia if we're doing deals, and they send them over here as well. Even though we've got telephones and emails and all sorts of other things, it's not the same. You don't feel as if you know them. So you can live in a village where there are people very close to you who live in Australia, and it's not unknown for that, it's not different for that. And for some people who aren't able, for many reasons, to go out and have friends in the same sense as most of us will do, I'm sure, then the television supplies them. If you look closely at soap operas, you realise that it isn't the story that catches people, it's the characters, and they feel them to be almost like friends. They send them cards. You know, they send them flowers if they get married and all sorts of things. It's as if they are substitute friends. They followed their lives as we followed the lives of people in our villages with tittle-tattle for the last sort of 2,000 years. And the tabloids discuss the proceeds in the soaps exactly as if they were real situations. And we gossip about them. And we have ideas about them, and we see what's really happening, and we're led through these stories just like we would be led through gossip years ago. These ideas were formulated around the 50s and the 60s by people like Marshall McLuhan and Baudelaire in France. And as philosophers, they sort of seem to grasp the fact that although we live in vast cities, we are a global village, we still live in little village knots, and you've got roughly a village full of friends that you know fairly well. You've got about 20 that you know pretty well, and you've got 4 or 5 who are close. And it's always been so. And it's so in Africa, and it's so in the desert, and it's so in Manchester. So this clan system is not so unusual for us and not so archaic. We still move in it. I can remember when I was a student, I was about 15, I was taking A-levels at a college in Liverpool, and we were talking about the Stuarts and things in history, and this black chap next to me said, do these tribes still fight in Northern Ireland, because this was quite prevalent at the time? And most of us were completely offended that he should consider that the clans in Scotland were tribes, but we have a different name, they're tribes, you know. And the way the Protestants and the Catholics were responding was again a big tribal thing. It was a blood feud, really. And until it was pointed out to me that they are actually different races of people in Northern Ireland, you know. Most of them are Scots Protestants and Irish Catholics. They are a different race of people. They even, at that, you know, historically had a different staple diet. One was potato, the other was bread. So it's a strange sort of thing to realise that most of the caste systems are formed in this way by tribes. One tribe overpowering another and making slaves of them, and they become castes. They become slaves that then structure them, stratify themselves by marriages. It's a very, very strange thing to realise that society is so structured. And Eugene would say that in these plays we're seeing, of course, English, French and Latin being spoken of in these speeches by people who are either, we would class working class, merchant class or noblemen. And that the English language is structured that way now, but in those days there was common or garden English, which people were only just starting to write in. It was only in Chaucer's day that poetry and plays were written in English, which is just 200 years before this chap. Before that it was always been French or in Latin. So we have a language here which is structured tribally as well. And Halliday would say is still structured tribally. If you want to convert the masses, you use very short words and use simple sentences. You don't go into clauses, you don't put parentheses in at all. You keep it very short, sharp, and you get a great deal of impact. And we can all understand those. And if you want to impress more people, then you get more clauses, you get very, very complicated sentences. When I was writing my PhD, I was told to make my language more opaque. It's too simple, too direct. You've given it away. You should take 4 or 5 paragraphs